Steven. How's it going?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be able to talk with you today. I just got done seeing your show on Sunday in Minneapolis, which I got to say was a magnificent show.
Sorry, you saw the show already?
Yes, I saw it in Minneapolis on Sunday.
Oh, great, okay. Minneapolis. Oh, yeah, that was fun. That was a standing show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I believe that's one of the only standing shows on the tour, I believe, right?
It is, so it stands out in my memory for that reason alone, yeah. But it was a great show, yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
Oh, yeah, it's got a great acoustics in that place, and it's got a really cool vibe to be able to see you, especially with the tour that you're doing this time around.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So, of course, you are on tour with supporting your new album, Hand Cannot Erase, which I gotta say is one of the best albums of 2015 so far.
Thank you.
Oh, not a problem. What went into the writing of this new album?
Say again, sorry, what?
What went into the process of writing the new album?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, for me, these days albums it's always good for me as a writer to have a theme to base an album around. And this time around, the album story came very early on in the process, and it was all based on this idea of, well, initially there was a news story, a true life story that happened in England about 10 years ago of this young woman that was found in her flat in North London, found dead in her flat in North London, and her body had been there undiscovered for over 2 years. And that was a very shocking thing to me, as it would be to almost anyone. But what became even more fascinating about that to me was when I saw a documentary about the young woman involved, a woman called Joyce Carol Vincent, and found out a lot more about her and realized, of course, that she was not your archetypal lonely little old lady. She was a young, attractive, popular young woman. So this idea that someone could be popular and somehow still disappear so completely became fascinating to me. And so I began to explore that. I mean, I didn't write the album about Joyce Carol Vincent, but I created a character that was very much inspired by her in order to explore this idea of life in the 21st century, life in the modern age, life in the city, life in the age of the internet and social networking, and to deal with all these kind of other subjects that kind of spin off from that: loneliness, isolation, nostalgia for childhood, regret, and all of these things came into this storyline. So it became a real gift for me, and in the end, I wrote a lot of, even more music that's on the record. There's still stuff that didn't fit in.
Oh, yes, I remember that. You actually did play a suite of songs that did not make it on the album in the show in Minneapolis.
Right, that's right. Yes, there's about 10 minutes right there of bits and ideas that were kind of, the one thing about making an album that kind of, you want it to feel like it has a nice narrative, logical kind of sense of journey to it. And sometimes that means throwing out things that you actually are really proud of, simply because they don't fit in, to the flow of the record. And that was certainly the case with this record. I've got a number of bits that I was very proud of. I just couldn't fit in.
Oh, yes, and I actually enjoyed most of that material that was played through there. Is there any chance of that becoming flourished into new songs in the future?
I'm not sure. I'm not keen on recycling, rejected material in subsequent albums. I prefer to start anew, But I think what might happen is there might be some kind of companion EP or something to Hand Cannot Erase at some point, because there's that song and there's 2 or 3 other songs that didn't make it onto the record. So it's a question of finding the time to record them properly, and maybe we'll put together some kind of EP for a later leg of the tour.
Oh, very cool. Again, I love the ideas of the suite that you played, and it would be nice to be able to hear that in a recorded sense as well, not just the live experience.
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel it's definitely worth releasing, so I think 95% definitely that will come out at some point, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, very nice. And of course, with this tour, you actually have a bit of a lineup change as far as the live lineup goes. Mm.
Yes, one of the problems I have now as a solo artist, there are many things I love about being a solo artist, but one of the downsides of being a solo artist is that you, of course, cannot rely on being able to maintain the same lineup all the time. You have you have to be able to either pay musicians retainers, which I cannot afford to do. I'm not Paul McCartney. I can't afford to pay musicians for the 9 months of the year that they're not working on the road or whatever. So I have to basically take my chances, and what that has meant is that I've had to rely on a pool of musicians rather than 4 different guitar players in my band over the last 3 years. I've had 3 different drummers in my band over the last 3 years. But the one kind of consistent factor is that all of these musicians are absolutely world-class musicians. They're absolutely at the top of their game on their respective instruments. Drummers alone, I've had Marco Miniman, I've had Chad Wackerman, and now I've got Craig Blundell, and they're all extraordinary players. So, but of course, every time you change the lineup, it does for a while upset the chemistry, and it takes a while to get that kind of band chemistry back. Usually, at least 7 or 8 shows before the band starts to gel again. And I still feel with this lineup, we're still getting to that kind of high point.
Yeah, I noticed that in Minneapolis. I mean, even though it's still a new lineup, it did feel, at least from the audience perspective, that you guys were gelling very well together, and it did make a great show.
Yeah, I think we're beginning to. We've been out on the road now for about a month. We started in South America about a month ago. So, that show in Minneapolis is probably something like our 20th or 25th show together. And even though I still think that there's a little way to go, we're certainly pretty familiar with each other now, and I think it is beginning to sound like a pretty well-oiled machine, yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that. And of course, with the tour, you're doing mainly focusing on the newest album, but you're also digging back into your past catalog as well. What brought that on with the set list?
Well, firstly, of course, the Hand Cannot Raise album is about an hour of music. Now, my show needs to be at least 2 hours long. So there's, of course, always a necessity to do something from the past. Now, what I have started to do on this tour is reach a little bit further back, as you point out. And in previous solo tours, I was quite reluctant to do anything that, say, predated my solo career. But I feel now that most people understand that the solo career now for me, this is what I do, and it's not some kind of temporary, side project. I think most people kind of understand now that this is what I do now, this is the main focus of my career. So I feel a little bit more, relaxed about going back and perhaps doing songs that were originally recorded by Porcupine Tree. They are, after all, my songs, So, and actually some of them fit very thematically very well into the framework of Hand Cannot Erase as well, because there are subjects on Hand Cannot Erase that I have dealt with many times before. For example, the internet was something I wrote about, social networking I wrote a lot about on a record called Fear of a Blank Planet about 7 or 8 years ago. And we do a song from that record in the show because it fits beautifully in, conceptually and thematically, it fits beautifully into the flow of material. So there's that consideration too.
Well, I'm glad to hear that too, because of course, with you focusing on the solo material, which I feel as you should do as a musician to create the music that you want to make, not what you feel that the fans expect you to make, I'm glad to be able to see that you're embracing a lot of what you did in the past and currently what you're doing as well.
To me, it's all part of a continuum. There is, I think sometimes fans get very uptight, maybe that's not the right word, but very, shall we say, very obsessed with the idea of, this album is not as good as that album's better than this album. But I think over time what happens with an artist is that the work simply becomes a body of work. And, you feel you can draw on different aspects of it. There are songs I wrote 3 or 4 years ago that I would feel already uncomfortable playing now because I just don't feel like I'm in that place anymore. But at the same time, there are songs I wrote 20 years ago that I still feel are very contemporary and very valid, in my current show. So it's really just a question of picking out the songs that I'm most proud of and that I feel resonate the best with, who I am right now in my life.
Oh, very nice to hear. So on future tours, would you be continuing to experiment playing the older material, say not even just from Porcupine Tree, but other material that you've been a part of?
I think, to be honest, I would only play material that I had written as a sole writer. I would draw the line at, say, performing songs that I had written with Tim Bowness, say, for No Man, or Aviv Geffen for Blackfield, because I feel those were collaborative compositions, and therefore they should be performed by those people. The reality is, with 95% of the Porcupine Tree material, it was written by me in isolation, and it was demoed by me in isolation. And to be honest, I didn't change that much from my demos, So I feel quite legitimate in claiming those now as my songs. They are my songs, but I wouldn't say do that with something that had been a co-write, for example, with someone else in the band or a different project. So I think probably realistically I would limit myself to playing the songs that I'd written on my own for Porcupine Tree over the years.
Oh, that does make a lot of sense.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of songs, there's 10 albums of that material.
Oh, very much so. And with that said, would that become more a part of the set list, or would it just be mainly focusing on your current solo material?
Well, I think whenever you go out with a new record, of course, 50% of the show is always going to be focused on whatever you've just done. Now, as time goes on and I have more and more solo records in my career, there will come a point where it may be that there isn't any room left for, songs from much earlier in my career. So I would say that realistically going forward, and I'm not a particularly nostalgic person, I've got to say that. I mean, I'm always more interested and excited by what I'm doing now. And you'll see that actually, are we not doing a lot of old stuff? We're doing the new stuff, but we're also doing stuff that hasn't even been recorded yet. I think for me, that's even more exciting, to play music that's still in a state of flux and hasn't even been put onto record yet. So there'll be a bit of that. There'll be always a focus on the current material, and hopefully always the opportunity for, a handful of songs from the past.
Oh, very nice. And of course, both just past time back on Sunday at the Varsity Theater, and a couple years back when we actually met in person at the Fine Line Music Cafe for the Raven tour. You have been doing an evening with shows. How does that feel comparing doing those shows as compared to either be a headliner, a part of a tour, or an opening act?
Well, for me, the idea was to completely immerse the audience in some kind of experience from the moment they come into the venue until the moment they leave. Now, if you were there right at the beginning of the evening, you will have seen that actually the show begins even before the band are on stage. Mm-hmm. There are visuals and there is kind of musical ambient background, sound effects, sound design things happening before the show. Same thing happened with the Raven tour. And similarly, when the band finished the show at the end, there's still something visual and musical going on even after the concert has ended. So I think I was more interested in this idea, rather than having, the support band and then the DJ playing heavy metal, whatever it is they usually, or hip hop, whatever it is they usually do, which to me kind of breaks the spell a bit. I think what's nice about coming to a show or having people come to your show is that you've kind of got them for that period of time. You've got them for the 3 hours or however long they're in the auditorium, and you can make use of all of that time, not just the time that you're on stage actually playing the songs, but actually the time before the concert as well, and the time after the concert. So I wanted to get away from this kind of traditional format of support band, DJ, band, and just have something much more immersive and much more about a kind of total experience. And that was my idea right from the beginning, the philosophy right from the beginning of my solo career.
Well, I'm glad to hear that too, because both times that I have been able to see you, I have experienced those full-on Steven Wilson effects right from when I walk in. Usually I get in right when the doors open, and I leave right after the show, and just the entire time I can just feel the atmosphere, and it just makes for a great night.
Right, I mean, even the music that you would have been hearing when you were coming in to the auditorium was selected based on the playlist of the character. And I don't know how much you know about the character, but in the special edition, the character talks about various music that she listens to, and she puts together playlists and mixtapes. So even the music that was playing as you walk into the auditorium is based on the character's playlist. And I love that sense of conceptual kind of completism, conceptual continuity. Everything that you experience from the moment you walk into the moment you walk out is relating to the Hand Cannot Erase concept in some way. And I love that. That for me, that's part of the storytelling.
I just wanted to thank you again for doing this interview. It's a tremendous honor. I've been a fan of yours ever since I picked up Deadwing back all those years ago, and it's been a tremendous honor to be able to sit down here with you, and hopefully I'll be able to see you again here in Minnesota the next time you come around.
I hope so. My pleasure to speak to you, Josh. Have a great day.
Oh, you too. Have a great rest of the tour.
Thanks, man. Cheers, buddy. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Josh.
Oh, thank you.
Shall I stay on here?
Yes, please stay on, Stephen.
Okay.